Okay, so just continuing on, we renamed both those kind of images we added, both the hoop and the background. One thing we want to do the background right away here is I want to just kind of lower its its opacity or its alpha value here just quickly. So just click on color there, and let's just kind of let's make that so that it's not so bright, so we can kind of see that hoop a little bit better. And so those are our kind of static objects. So we're just going to add the static stuff first, and then we're going to kind of build the moving stuff and talk about the physics and things after. So the next thing we want to do here is we want to actually add, I need to have something, basically walls on the outside here, maybe a wall underneath the hoop, and then make the hoop so that it actually can receive a collision as well. And so we want things to bounce off the outside walls, and we want actually the game to end once we hit the top of the hoop there. So we're going to set that up real quick here. So the first thing we're going to do, let's just, on that black background image, we're there. But we're going to actually add a new game object, and we're just going to go create empty. And what I'm going to call this one floor, because it's going to be on the bottom. And then the component we're going to add to this is we're actually going to add a physics 2D component. And we are going to add a box collider, which kind of makes sense. We're going to make a floor, and you can see it's really, really small down there. But we can zoom in. But what I'm going to just do is I'm just going to expand that X value a ton, and you can see how I did that. It's just a click and drag across. But I'm thinking that this screen is what do they say, around 800 or something like that. Oh, it's going to be much. I think I made it half that size. So let's say 400. Yeah, 400 looks about right. And then I'm going to make the Y value, I'm going to make it just so I can, not thick enough that I can see it, so I know that it's a floor. And then I'm just going to grab that, and I'm going to move that down here below. Okay, and there's not really much else you need to do to that. That's going to just be an object now. It has a box collider on it, so whatever hits that is going to exhibit physics. Now what I'm going to, you can see again, I didn't name it properly, or I named it and I didn't hit enter, and so now it's enter. Now what I want to do with that floor, I can do the roof almost the same, so I'm just going to go right click and duplicate that, drag up to the top. There is another level there, if you didn't. Sometimes you don't see the other one, you're like, oh no, that's gone now. No, it's not. And I'm going to call this one roof, and then I'm going to hit enter, and you can see I have two levels there. If I just hold down control and select them both, you can see I have a ceiling and a roof there. The other thing that I'm just going to duplicate again. I'm going to duplicate roof again, and then I'm going to change the properties here. So I'm going to do the left wall here, left wall, and same kind of thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just going to change this. I think that the value here should, the Y on the wall is going to be 300 high, and I'm going to make it by 10 again, just so that we get a basic wall there. So we're going to be walled in there, and then I'll duplicate that left wall, and we're going to rename it right wall, and then we should have from there our basic box set up. And the way we can check to make sure that's okay is I just go, if I hold down shift and select all four, now we're kind of boxed in with these kind of colliders. So that's our kind of first dabble into a kind of physics element there. These are just going to be serve as walls for us. One last thing I want to add here while we're at it, let's go roof. I'm going to duplicate roof again, duplicate roof, and with roof what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink this down to, I don't know, say 50 to start. Maybe it's going to end up being larger than that, but I'm going to move this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to block the bottom part of the rim, because I'm going to make a collider on the actual hoop itself, but I want, if the basketball only strikes the top of the hoop, for it to go in. And I'm just going to call this, let's call it bottom rim. And then I'll just expand that a little bit. Notice I can click and drag to do that. And that's probably going to be good enough. I'm going to put it a little bit below the red there, because we still need to add a collider to our basket. So with the basket, let's go back to the hoop. So click on the hoop. With that, we haven't added anything to it yet. So the component we're going to add to that first is we're going to add what's called a rigid body. So we're going to go to Physics 2D, and we're going to add a rigid body 2D. Now, I'm not going to go into big explanation of this. By adding a rigid body, then we can do what's called other targets, which is when two things collide and one passes right through, but it triggers an event. And collisions, which what happens where we actually get some physics happening. Two things collide, and they kind of bounce off each other, can bounce off each other depending on our properties. So I'm going to add a rigid body there. I think we need that for this one. Just trying to remember. For future, if this was a moving object that we move with a user event, we want to select this is kinematic. This one is not, so we're going to leave as is. And then what we're going to do is, again, we're going to add that Physics 2D box collider to this. Now, since we've added that right to this hoop, okay, it's a component of the hoop, we need to resize that. And so I'm going to stretch that out a little bit. Now you can see that that's probably below where my other one is. I'm going to scroll in here just a little bit so we can just get a better view of what I'm working on here. So that looks okay. Now what I want though, probably want a little bit less, so I want that to only be the length of the hoop. Let's make it a little bit thicker just so that I can see it better. And I'm going to move that up and make sure it's above that bottom rim, right? I want that above bottom rim. Now, in order for me to do that, I'm just going to change the Y value. So I'm just going to up the Y value, we'll say 10, see what happens there. Not bad. Let's up the Y value, say 13. And now I just want to check and make sure that that's on top of bottom rim. And so that's not perfect, but you can see that bottom rim is at least going to block anything coming in this direction from hitting that collider on the top of the roof there. So that's the important kind of concept there, is we have that kind of collider there. Now, with some of the other elements that are moving, we're going to also add a physics property here, physics material, I guess. We are not going to do that for this, but we are going to add a script for our hoop. So let's get into that right away. Our first script here. So we're going to go into new script, and we're going to just call this hoop. Keep things simple. Name our scripts the same as what we're naming our object. C# is our language. Yep. So we want to create and add. And then we want to actually go to that script. So it'll appear first under assets, and we're going to take it and drag it into our scripts just to keep things as tidy as possible. And so I'll go into scripts. Now I should have the level manager because that came in with our menus, which is good. We're still going to use level manager later on. But with our hoop, when I open that up in MonoDevelop, just double click on it. Now, like I said before, I copied and I have a file that contains all of the script text that I'm going to need. I'm going to copy and paste, but then I'm going to read through it. I just thought it would speed things up if I did it this way. So, with our hoop, what we're going to do, we're going to come down here. And let's grab just whatever's in here, inside of that hoop. And let's go back to MonoDevelop. You can see for this time around, we're not going to need the start and update, so let's just get rid of those. I'm going to copy and paste in what we have going on here. Now, the most important line of code that you probably have here is first of all, well, there's several lines of code actually, but the level manager here, we need to have an instance of our level manager, which was another one of our scripts, right? If we go back to Unity, we can actually open up level manager, and MonoDevelop's already open. You can see, remember that was the one we did last time around where it opens the application level, and that's how we kind of navigate through our menu or through our different levels. And then we have the quit as well as the other function in there. Now, so we need to make an instance of that, and then what we need to do is, this is an important statement here. On trigger enter 2D collider trigger, string name equals trigger game object if it equals the ball. So basically, if what this is saying is this trigger, if the collision with the hoop is the ball, which we're going to add in a little bit here, okay, it's going to load level win. So when the ball collides with the hoop, okay, it's going to go to the win level. Now, that's an important part. One thing that we haven't set yet, though, is this trigger. So you see it's asking for a trigger there. Now, by default, it would be a collision at this stage. I'm not going to add in the collision trigger. We're going to see that in a bit. But this method here is a built-in method in Unity. So you have to remember that on trigger, enter 2D, and it takes in a collider 2D and a trigger. And so that trigger will be whatever collides with it. So let's go back to Unity. We haven't set that trigger yet. So what we're going to go back, once we're inside Unity, and make sure we're, let's click on our hoop. And in the inspector, you will see is trigger. We need to say is trigger is selected there. Now, we're not going to be able to see anything happen right now because we don't have anything to collide with it. But when the ball gets there, we need to make sure that that's the case. Now, the only reason why, if you go back to that code, that we have this if statement here, we could just run this manager load level. But there is another object that we're going to have. The bad guys could possibly run into that hoop, and we don't want it to trigger you win when the bad guys run into the hoop. We want only the ball to do that, and so that's why there's this if statement there, just to clarify that. Okay, so the hoop should be done, so let's just save our project. So the next thing that we want to add is we want to start adding, and I forgot to add the sound to this game, but we'll add that at the very end. What we're going to add next is let's add in the ball and get some physics happening to the ball. So once again, we're within the canvas here, so we're going to go game object, UI, image, and so we have an image coming in there. Now we need to go to our sprites folder, and we want to add in the ball. And so I'm just going to drag that ball over to that image property there, and then let's resize our ball. The ball I think is what I want at 35 by 35. And we'll get that perfect in a second. I'm just going to move the ball over here. If you remember my diagram from the start, we had the ball in that top kind of corner there. So let's start the ball there, and let's just make sure that it's 35 by 35. And that's going to work for us, I think. Okay, might have to adjust my hoop there if that doesn't leave enough room, but I think that's enough room to get that shot up there. So we're going to go with that. Now, the ball is going to need a lot of different things happening to it. The first component that we're going to need to add to the ball is we need to make it a rigid property as well. And so let's do that. So we're going to add a component, and we're going to make 2D, physics 2D, and make it a rigid body. Now, like I said before, we're not moving the ball, so we're not selecting this kinematic. But we're going to add another component here, and we're going to call this physics 2D, and this is going to be actually a circle collider 2D. So last time we did a box collider, this time it's going to be circle collider. And then what we're going to do is we're going to scroll down within that, and we're going to find the radius. We're going to leave the X and Y values alone. And within the radius there, you can click and drag. You should be able to see a green circle. Just trying to scroll in a little bit more here, expanding as I click and drag on that ball there. So you can see as I click and drag here, I want to get that to match the outside outline of that ball. That's where I want it to, if it's reading a collision, that's the line I want it to read on. So again, here I can see this is just named image right now. I need to change the name of that really quick to ball. Again, make sure you click enter when you're done with that. So enter, and so I have both a rigid body 2D added and a circle collider 2D added. Now, the other thing that we want to, with this rigid body, notice that there's a gravity scale here. And there probably is with the hoop as well. And I forgot to change that. Now let's take a look at what happens. First of all, let's just run this for a second. So let's just save scene. Let's see what happens when I actually run this scene. Uh-oh. Look at this. My basketball slide, my hoop sliding down, my ball is sliding down. That's probably okay what my ball is. Probably not a good thing that my hoop is. So, let's go back to the hoop for a second. I thought I had everything set up. Let's change the hoop. Once I'm on the hoop, let's change the gravity to 0.